Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is pro-revenge story. Okay, I'll share another revenge story. I'm only vengeful when someone deserves it, and that happens pretty often, so I'll share one from 2021. Anyone who has seen my posts knows I used to work in private security. Not mall cops, but highly trained, skilled, and armed security. We worked at residential buildings and complexes that were very high-end. Think $300,000 cars in the parking garage is high-end. Places like this are Karen Central. Imagine apartments full of Karens and entitled teenagers. The company owner, Ryan, was awesome. A cop as his regular job, he understood what we faced. His advice was, be nice, but put the hammer down if you have to and don't take their crap. Also, if we don't get at least 2 complaints a month about us for worthless stuff, we aren't engaging the residents enough. He'd laugh when he said this. This is important to the revenge. Each supervisor had 15 properties under their control. Regular officers patrolled them, but we supervisors were in charge of helping with evictions, attending town halls on security issues, deciding how officers patrol, and updating which areas were problematic or needed checking. I had 12 properties. In one apartment complex, we had a couple always calling us. We had an emergency line open from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. When we arrived, they'd complain about their upstairs neighbors. Their list of complaints constantly changed. Stomping, loud music, talking too loudly, cooking smells, their dog urinating on the balcony and it dripping onto theirs. These would be valid complaints if we found evidence, which we never did. When they saw we were starting to question if their complaints were real, they changed tactics and went racist. The couple above them were a sweet middle-aged Asian couple, the Brooks. Mr. Brooke was an immigrant, but Mrs. Brooke was born and raised American. These racist cretins had only talked to the husband, so they assumed, as all racists do, that they were both immigrants. Those people are always making noise at night, Mrs. Walker would say, her nose turned up. We're trying to sleep and they're up there stomping around. Don't they know how to be considerate? Mr. Walker would add. So this white sheet-wearing couple started making comments like, those Asians, and they're in America, why can't they cook American food, and I'm afraid to be in the parking garage when one of them is driving in it. While it angered me, those comments alone weren't enough for an eviction. All I could do was have my officers record the exact phrasing in their reports. I asked the property manager, Miss Patel, about the comments, and she said, if they don't say these things directly to the residents and the residents don't complain, there's not much I can do under the lease terms. So I tried to think of some way to get them evicted. Not only were they lying to get a nice couple evicted, but they were calling in false reports and wasting the officer's time. And they didn't call just every once in a while. They called sometimes twice in one night, usually 8 times a week. A month later, the opportunity was handed to me. The Brooks called me during the day and informed me they were going to China for 2 weeks and no one would be in their apartment. We wanted to let you know in case those people downstairs start complaining again, Mrs. Brooks said. This way you'll know they're lying. We'd also appreciate if you could check our door once a night to make sure it's locked and not broken into, Mr. Brooke added. I told the Brooks not to tell any neighbors they were leaving and to only inform the property manager besides myself. We had a patrol meeting that night. Officers didn't work one specific region, so I told them all my plan. Listen up, everyone, I said. I want you to respond each time the walkers call and write down exactly what they claim happened. Record any racial terms, no matter how minor. Mark the reports urgent and submit them immediately. We had an online system for all business. Email, schedules, report submitting, the works. During those 14 days, the walkers complained 18 times. Everything was documented, and I took it to Miss Patel. She looked it over and said, let's evict them. Side note, the client gets charged more for emergency responses than for regular patrols, meaning their lies were costing money. Since these were rentals, there was no HOA. In this situation, myself, the property manager, and the tenants sit down at a table. The charges for eviction are read. If the eviction is security-related, I state what violations have occurred. Not opinions, just facts based on the reports, which the tenants receive copies of. Then the tenants have a right to speak and ask questions. The property manager then decides what happens next. The walkers were sent a formal letter stating they were facing eviction and had 10 days to set up a meeting. If not, the eviction would be processed. They scheduled one. When I arrived, the walkers and Miss Patel were already present. Mrs. Walker immediately attacked me because I was armed. Uniforms for these situations are a dress shirt, slacks, tie, and one weapon with one magazine. Evictions can be dangerous. Why are you carrying a gun? She demanded. This is outrageous. I feel threatened. I just politely informed her, this is my standard uniform, and it's not your call to make. She tried to say she felt uncomfortable and wanted to reschedule, but Miss Patel firmly stated, this happens now, or I will evict you. So they agreed to continue. For legal reasons, these sessions were recorded on video, so tenants can't lie in eviction court or sue. In front of me were all 18 reports, and I went over each one. Time, date, who called, apartment number. I also read out each line, asking them to tell me what they felt was false and what was true. They only claimed the racial terms weren't true. At the end of each report, I said, "So the report is accurate in that tenants in apartment 307 were playing their music too loud, but you're claiming the comments about their race are false?" I got a yes answer every time. Around the 7th report, I think Mrs. Walker caught on. She started complaining, "You're dragging this out on purpose. This is ridiculous." I just smiled politely and said, "This is my role in the process, and you'll have ample opportunity to speak and ask questions after I'm done." Then I went through the rest and let them build their defense. After getting them to admit to their lies, I dropped the bomb. I should inform you that the tenants in apartment 307 were actually out of the country during the time of these 18 reports. They provided proof they were gone, and my officers checked the apartment once a night and confirmed it was empty. Then I smiled pleasantly and ended my part. The look on their faces was a mix of anger and fear. They didn't have a defense. They started saying that myself and the manager were choosing immigrants over Americans. "This is discrimination against real Americans," Mr. Walker shouted. "Oh, did I mention Miss Patel is an immigrant? That went over like a hand grenade in a collection plate." Once they said that, she stopped them and told them she was an immigrant herself. That made matters worse. "Well, that explains it," Mrs. Walker sneered. "You're just taking up for your own kind." During this, I remained calm and collected. Inside my mind, I was thinking, "Oh crap, they're digging themselves deeper." After a few more racial remarks, Miss Patel just stopped them and said, "I've heard enough. You're guilty of filing false reports and exhibiting discriminatory behavior. I'll process the eviction paperwork with the courts in the morning." Long story short, they were given 14 days to vacate. From what I heard, the judge gave them 30 days until Mr. Walker called him a racial name in court. I was able to call the Brooks and let them know it was over. "You don't have to worry anymore," I told them. "We won't be responding to calls about your apartment for the next 14 days until the eviction is complete and those tenants leave. But you're welcome to call any time if you need help or have an issue." "Thank you so much," Mrs. Brooks said, relief evident in her voice. "It's been so stressful dealing with their harassment." "You've done us a great service," Mr. Brooks added. "We can finally live in peace. Security officers want to help so badly, but are limited by either laws, property management rules, or both, so it's nice to do some good when we can." The next one is an entitled people story. My family's ranch has been our pride and joy for 3 generations. Granddad bought this 15-acre plot back in the 1950s when this area was nothing but farmland and open spaces. Now, it's the last remaining large property in what's become a suburban sprawl of cookie-cutter homes and strip malls. I moved back to take over the ranch after my dad passed away 5 years ago. It wasn't an easy decision. I had a decent job in the city, but someone needed to take care of the place, and I've always loved the wide open space and the handful of horses we keep. Plus, having your nearest neighbor a quarter-mile away has its perks. Well, it did until Sunny Meadows subdivision started construction. When the developers first broke ground on the land adjacent to our eastern fence line, I didn't think much of it. Progress happens, and I couldn't blame people for wanting to live in our beautiful area. The sales brochures advertised country living with city convenience, which was a nice way of saying they were cramming as many houses as possible onto the land while leaving a thin strip of trees between properties to maintain the rural feel. Within 6 months, the first residents moved in, and that's when the trouble started. It began with cars, lots of them. The development was built with those narrow streets that only allow parking on one side, and each house had a driveway barely big enough for 2 vehicles. Apparently, the developers didn't account for the fact that most families have more than 2 cars these days, not to mention guests. I first noticed cars parked along our shared fence line. The road there was technically public, but it was a dirt road that ran along my property, which I maintained. Soon enough, it was filled with cars every weekend. No big deal, I figured. People need to park somewhere. Then I started finding beer cans and trash on my side of the fence. Again, annoying, but manageable. I put up a no littering sign and kept it moving. Everything changed when I got a letter in the mail from Sunny Meadows Homeowners Association. I laughed out loud when I saw it, thinking it was sent to me by mistake. The letter stated that I was in violation of several HOA bylaws, including improper land use, unsightly equipment storage, and failure to maintain property to community standards. I called the number listed on the letter and got connected to someone named Doug, who identified himself as the HOA president. "Hi, Doug. This is Jack Reynolds from the ranch next door. I got this letter from your HOA, but there must be some mistake. My property isn't part of your development." "Mr. Reynolds," he said in a tone that made me want to hang up immediately, "your property borders our community and affects our property values. The board has determined that your ranch qualifies as adjacent common land subject to our bylaws." I nearly choked. "That's not how this works. You can't just decide my private property is subject to your rules." "I assure you we can. Our legal team has reviewed the situation thoroughly. You have 30 days to correct the violations or face fines." "Doug, I've owned this property for 5 years and my family has had it for over 70. We're not part of your HOA, never signed anything and never will. Don't send me any more letters." I hung up and threw the letter in the trash, figuring that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I came home from a supply run to find cars parked on my property. Not along the fence, on my actual land. About a dozen vehicles were parked in the field where I usually let the horses graze. Someone had cut the lock on my gate and swung it wide open. I parked my truck to block any more cars from entering and walked around asking whose vehicles these were. A woman loading groceries into her trunk looked at me like I was insane. "This is the overflow parking for Sunny Meadows," she said. "The HOA president sent an email yesterday." "Ma'am, this is private property. This is my ranch." She shrugged. "The email said the community acquired additional parking space. Take it up with the HOA." I called the sheriff immediately. When Deputy Wilson arrived, he knew me well enough not to question my claim to the property. He took photos of the cut lock and the cars and started writing tickets for trespassing. As people came to move their cars, most were confused and apologetic. One guy showed me the email from the HOA on his phone. It read, "Good news. The board has secured additional community parking adjacent to the eastern entrance. Please use this space for guests and additional vehicles." Not one word about it being private property. They made it sound like they'd made some kind of deal with me. The deputy suggested I file a police report for the damaged lock and trespassing, which I did. I also installed a heavier chain and lock on the gate and put up no trespassing signs every 20 feet along the fence line. The next day, Doug from the HOA called me. "Reynolds, what's the meaning of this? You had our residents' cars ticketed. Your residents were trespassing on private property after someone cut my lock. You told them my ranch was community parking. That's illegal, Doug. We had an understanding." "We had no understanding. I told you clearly that my property is not subject to your HOA. Now I've filed a police report naming your HOA specifically for encouraging trespassing and property damage." "You'll be hearing from our attorney," he snapped before hanging up. Sure enough, 3 days later, I received a certified letter from Goldstein and Associates, attorneys at law, claiming that my property was subject to an easement that allowed for community use. It cited some obscure case law and threatened legal action if I continued to obstruct community access. I took the letter to my own lawyer, Maria Gonzalez, who'd helped with my dad's estate. She read it and actually laughed. "This is complete nonsense," she said. "They're bluffing. There's no easement on your property and they can't create one unilaterally. This letter is just meant to scare you." Maria drafted a response that was wonderfully direct. It clarified that no easement existed, that my property was not and had never been part of their HOA, and that any further attempts to access my property or claim authority over it would result in legal action for trespassing, harassment, and potentially fraud. We thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next weekend, I woke up to the sound of machinery. I looked out my window to see a small bulldozer pushing dirt on my property, creating what looked like a parking lot just inside my fence line. A sign had been posted, "Sunny Meadows Resident Parking." I was out the door in my pajamas and boots before I even had time to think. I ran toward the bulldozer, waving my arms and yelling for the operator to stop. He cut the engine and lifted his headphones. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted. "Just following orders, man. HOA contracted us to grade this parking area. This is private property. You're trespassing and destroying my land." He looked genuinely confused. "I've got paperwork saying this is HOA common land. Got permits and everything." "Show me," I demanded. He climbed down and pulled some papers from the cab. The permit was for improvements to community common area, but listed the Sunny Meadows HOA as the property owner. The address was cleverly written to make it seem like it was part of their development. "These permits were obtained fraudulently," I told him. "I'm calling the sheriff and my lawyer. You need to leave now, or you'll be arrested." The operator, to his credit, seemed concerned. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I'm just doing the job I was hired for." "I understand, but you've been lied to." This is my property, not the HOA's. While we were talking, a black SUV pulled up, and out stepped Doug, along with a woman in a business suit I hadn't seen before. "Mr. Reynolds," Doug said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I see you've met our landscaping crew. We're just implementing the community improvements we discussed." "We never discussed anything, and you know it," I said, my voice steady despite my anger. "You obtained fraudulent permits by claiming to own my property. The sheriff is on his way, and my attorney has been notified." The woman stepped forward. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm Jennifer Goldstein. We sent you a notice regarding the easement." "There is no easement," I cut her off. "You made that up. What you're doing is criminal trespassing, property damage, and fraud." Doug's smile faltered. "Now, Reynolds, there's no need to be difficult. Our community needs this parking area, and your unused field is the perfect location. We're prepared to offer you a nominal fee for the inconvenience." My answer is no. It's always been no. Now get off my property before the sheriff arrives. The sheriff's department sent 2 deputies this time, including Deputy Wilson again. They documented everything, took statements, and informed Doug and his lawyer that they needed to leave immediately. The bulldozer operator was apologetic and gave his statement about how he'd been hired. The deputies explained that while they couldn't determine the validity of the permits on the spot, they could confirm I was the legal owner of the property and that no one had permission to be there. After they left, I called Maria and explained what happened. She was furious. "This crosses the line from civil into criminal," she said. "They falsified documents to obtain permits. I'm filing for an emergency injunction first thing Monday morning, and we're going to sue them for everything they've done." True to her word, by Monday afternoon we had a temporary restraining order against the Sunny Meadows HOA, prohibiting them from entering my property or taking any action regarding it. Maria also filed a lawsuit against the HOA for trespassing, property damage, fraud, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The next few months were a legal whirlwind. We discovered that Doug and 2 other board members had created fraudulent documents claiming my eastern field was designated as community common land during the development's planning phase. They'd manipulated the property boundaries on maps submitted to the county for permits. During discovery, we obtained emails between board members discussing how they knew the land was private but planned to gradually assert control through continuous use and legal pressure until I gave in. One email from Doug actually said, "The old ranch doesn't fit with our community aesthetic. Once we control the parking area, we can push for more." When the judge saw these emails along with the falsified permits and property documents, she was livid. The case never made it to trial. The HOA's insurance company pushed for a settlement when they realized how bad it looked. The settlement included full payment for all damages to my property, a substantial payment for the harassment and stress, a legally binding agreement acknowledging my property boundaries, permanent injunctions against any HOA claims to my land, a public apology to be published in the community newsletter, Doug's resignation from the HOA board. Additionally, the county prosecutor opened an investigation into the permit fraud, which eventually led to charges against Doug and the HOA treasurer. The new HOA board, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, has been respectfully distant. They installed a proper fence along our shared boundary with clear private property markers on their side. I used part of the settlement money to build a stable workshop I'd been planning for years. The rest went into a trust for the property's long-term maintenance. I also installed security cameras along the entire perimeter and a much more substantial gate. Occasionally, I still find new residents confused about why they can't park on the community land they heard about when they moved in. I politely explain that it's my private ranch and always has been. One new neighbor even apologized on behalf of the community and brought over a homemade pie as a peace offering. I invited her family to meet the horses, and they've become good friends. I learned an important lesson through all this. Some people will try to take whatever they can if you don't stand firm. But I also learned that most people are reasonable when given the facts. The new HOA board actually consults me now when they're planning events that might impact my property, like their summer festival with fireworks that could spook the horses. As for Doug, I heard he moved to another state after the legal trouble. I don't wish him ill, but I hope he learned that you can't just take what isn't yours, no matter how official you make your letterhead look. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I work at a massive company in corporate. Great place, but unfortunately was stuck under a micromanaging director who had random neurotic episodes. Our team was always burnt out because if Mr. Director saw you leave your desk for any reason, like to go to the bathroom, get water, or take a lunch break, he took that as you not being busy enough and would pile on even more useless work. And if you left a minute before 5:05, he got really upset. Oh, and forget about working from home. Everyone else did. Finally, the time came for the big international trip I had been planning for years that was now possible after COVID. I hardly took time off and slaved away the whole year while my friends on other teams enjoyed life. We were more pressured this year to always be working and not take time off. We had so much work we couldn't even take time off. I ensure everything is wrapped up first, plus it's December, so most people are out anyway. Take my 1.5-week trip and had an amazing time. Fast forward a month and my manager, who reports to Mr. Director, tells me that I need to watch out and not take so much vacation. He states matter-of-factly that I need to be more careful about using my days, and I've actually run out of time to take off. What, we're checking vacation days? I was shocked as we were repeatedly told that we should not log our days in the system because they aren't checking. It's an honor system. And nobody cares how many days you take. If it's reasonable, I ask, what should I do differently? I always check well in advance and add it on your calendar. Should I start logging my days in the system? How is that possible if I have at least a week left? I keep track myself. He won't give me a straight answer and is super vague. Okay, since we're now tracking vacation days, I'll make sure I log everything in the system I went in and backlogged all of the days I had ever taken off prior years. Weeks upon weeks of PTO. Even needed HR approval since some were so long ago. Manager had to go in and approve every single request since it notifies you and requires you to respond. Going forward, I submitted everything. And yes, I had plenty of PTO left. Manager starts getting annoyed. Says that I really don't need to log time off. I stop him right there. But I thought I was taking too much vacation? We all need to be sure that we're being truthful about the honor system. He doesn't know what to say. Later, a teammate tells me what really went down. Turns out one day, Mr. Director decided that his team was taking too much time off. That all the useless work he assigned was not getting done. He had one of his tantrums and started freaking out and tracked down every day off, doctor's appointment, sick day, etc. that our team of 8 people had taken going back at least a year. He was checking calendars, digging up emails, asking other people if they saw us this day or that, even though he had told us time and time again, you don't need to log your days, we're not checking. But because Mr. Director was a B-cluster narcissist, he was much too busy and important to take up his concerns with us lowly employees directly. Or to talk things through like an adult and get all the facts first. But not too busy to account for every hour I wasn't at work. This would be one of many infractions that came out of nowhere. Mr. Director was also an extremely difficult person to work with. Other teams did not want to work with our team. He treated people poorly, and I can't tell you how many people flat out hated him. And guess what? Nobody had used anywhere near all their PTO, there were 0 performance concerns, and we were an extremely high-performing team due to the constant fear of setting him off. I always asked for feedback and got nothing, yet coworkers with planned family trips were getting pressured into pushing them back again, and again, and again, because Mr. Director needed them there sitting at their desk in case something important came up. Meanwhile, Mr. Director made sure to use more than his allotted PTO days and frequently took week-long trips. I made sure to use the rest of my PTO days since they were now being tracked. Mr. Director actually tried to stop it, but I threatened to take it up with HR since I had plenty of time left and he backed off. Thankfully, I escaped that team and moved internally. I was doing so much work, much of it technical for a non-technical team, that nobody knew how to do it. Mr. Director was frantically reaching out to me and demanding me to fix stuff. Even though I spent my last 2 weeks documenting and transitioning over everything, I chose to ignore him, and it felt great. My old teammates still there are miserable. The people that replaced us are already trying to leave. One guy, who'd been with the company for years, completely left the company a month after joining this team when realizing his mistake. The next one is an entitled People Story from the files of Plausible Deniability. If you think this post is about you, it isn't. Any similarities between what happened and this post are completely coincidental, so don't start something about it, okay? A relative was visiting a small family that included the parents and a teenager. Said relative was asked to take a family picture. Of course, the teen grumbled and complained about being asked to put on a nice shirt, comb the hair for the first time in a week, and come outside. But teenagers are legally required to act like teenagers. The relative has some decent skills with taking pictures. $75 to $100 per hour level of wedding photographer work would be an easy hire. Unfortunately, every photo has to be worked out perfectly, so what should have been a snap or two with an iPhone turned into 3. 5 minutes per shot, manually adjusting the focus, setting the f-stop and getting the exposure just right, adjusting the poses, reviewing the pic and saying it isn't good enough, etc. What would have been 2 minutes tops kept dragging on and on. After 30 minutes, the teen said they were done and went back inside. Said teenager beat me by seconds. I hate having my picture taken in normal conditions, and this impromptu session had taxed my patience to the end. Later on, the photographer, guest in my house, cornered me and laid into me about how disrespectful I was, and I received a 15-minute lecture about how he is an artist, and the teen deserves to have at least one decent picture to remember me when I'm dead. The photographer also pointed out every family portrait on display and explained why they were poor pictures, and he would never product such horrible garbage. He was an amazing photographer, you see. He said so himself, which gave him the right to critique every photograph he saw. From there, it spun into a lecture about how every parent today is horrible and nobody is teaching kids any respect. That a teenager didn't want to hold still indefinitely for a picture and was rude, surly, wanted to spend every moment on the computer or phone in the bedroom was proof that the parents were doing a much worse job than he ever would, and all he wanted was to make sure that the teen wasn't going to end up homeless and friendless with zero social skills. So the least the parents could do was respect and support his efforts to do so because he, as a 39-year-old never married, no kid individual who served in the Navy, on a ship in Afghanistan no less so he knew combat. For 4 years, just knew better and could fix everything that was wrong. When he started to question parenting decisions of his host, a response was needed. The following points were pointed out to him, none of which he had ever noticed/considered. Teenagers act like teenagers. They are going to be grumpy and moody. They are going to hide in their bedrooms. They are going to spend a lot of time on phones/computers. They are going to be sarcastic and at times rude to their parents. Many of them are going to hate having their picture taken. They are going to emerge from their den like a furry critter that smells kinda bad, inhale food as if there is no tomorrow, and quickly scamper back into hiding. They are going to do the occasional stupid and unsafe thing, and then they will grow out of it. And if they don't do any of those things, then I would actually be a little concerned because teen brains are switching from 100% dependent to 100% independent, and as they rewire the neurons and get a taste of new hormones, they are going to act like that. But I saw some kids and they were riding their bikes too fast, and I told them that they would get hurt. As their elder, I deserve respect, but they laughed at me and ignored me. Well, teens are like that. And you will never know this, but sometimes after you aren't looking, they will decide that you are right. They are acting recklessly and might get hurt and adjust their activity accordingly. But they will never let you see them admit they were wrong, and they will never let their friends see them back down to an old geezer. So don't worry about it. And above all, don't expect civilian teens to treat your petty officer third-classness as if you were their admiral. So you're okay with just letting him be rude like that and talk back and not sit down and have a long, proper meal? Yeah, pretty much. If it is a special occasion or something important, he'll act differently. And I'm just supposed to stand back and do nothing while you won't let me fix him? You aren't his parent, so you don't get to fix him. If he's about to fall off a cliff, catch him, but other than that, let him be a teen. And while you are entitled to have your own thoughts and opinions, you are not entitled to express them and critique parents. If you really want to tell people what they are doing wrong, write a book or set up a YouTube channel, but in this house, it is a hard no, and if you can't resist, then you won't be welcome to come over anymore. Come back when he's 24 and see what he's like then. He got pissed and stormed out. I've heard he's been bad-mouthing the horrible, irresponsible parents in one of the family chats, but since he's the only one who does not have or has already raised teenagers of his own, nobody is taking his side, which probably pisses him off even more. Anyway, thank you for watching.